Voices in Time, recording life stories. Today is Thursday, April 5th, 2018. I'm Stacy Wells, and I'm here today with Caroline Hopkins in her home at Santa Marta in Olathe, Kansas, to talk about the memories and the stories of her lifetime. Caroline, why don't we start off? Can you just tell me your full name and when and where you were born?
My name is Caroline Louise Hopkins. I was born July 18th, 1936 in Kansas City, Missouri. My folks lived in Kansas, but the hospital was in Missouri.
Kansas City, Missouri, but you were a Kansas City, Kansas girl.
Yeah.
And how about your name? Do you know why your parents chose your name?
If I was told, I don't remember.
Maybe they just liked the name?
As far as I remember, that's the situation. Yeah.
So have you always gone by Caroline, or did you have a nickname growing up?
My folks called me Carolyn and spelled it Caroline.
Oh, they called you Carolyn, though.
They called me Carolyn.
So have you always gone by Carolyn instead of Caroline?
Charlie's the one that started with the Caroline. His mother had more than one middle name, and one of them was Caroline. Mm-hmm. And so you can tell my family and my friends, Charlie friends. So it's interesting that my folks did call me Caroline.
So you answered to both.
Yes.
Well, let's go back a couple generations and talk about your grandparents. Let's start on your father's side. Your grandmother on your father's side was named Ethel, I believe. Ethel Sewell? How was that pronounced, the last name?
S-O-U-L-E, soul.
Soul.
Like the soul on your shoe.
Okay. And did you know your grandfather or what his name was?
I don't remember his name. Mm-hmm. He was not living
when you were born?
Anytime, no, that I was alive.
Did you know your grandmother Soul?
I knew my grandmother Soul. As I remember, the times I remember, she lived with my aunts, one and then the other.
In Kansas City, Kansas?
In Kansas City,
okay.
Yeah. Some of them lived in Missouri or Kansas, but she lived with both of my dad's sisters at various times.
Well, when you close your eyes maybe and think about her, how would you describe her? You have a memory of what she looked like?
She was a little heavy, not fat. She wore glasses. She had gray hair. That's what I remember.
Do you remember her personality, what she was like as a person? Did you know her very well, or how old were you when she passed away?
Well, I don't know how old I was when she passed away.
But a child?
I was I know we used to have her for dinner, and she'd come over and read, but I'm not remembering a lot of time with her.
A lot about her.
Did
you know anything about the ancestry on that side, the soul, or where they came from, the heritage at all?
Not that I remember.
Well, let's move on to your maternal grandparents, your mother's parents, Hannah and Edward, I think it is?
Yeah.
Bennett. How about those grandparents? Did you know them very well?
My grandfather died when the girls were young. So, no, I didn't know my... Mm-hmm. And my grandmother, she lived with my mother's youngest sister a lot of the time that I remember.
Did she also live in Kansas City?
Yeah, she lived in town. And it seemed to me like, and Mom had her over one day a week, and she spent the day. And then she lived with us for a while when I was in high school, and I don't remember how many years.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you remember of her as a person, what she was like, or personality-wise?
I mean, it seems to me like she was pretty easy to get along with. She and my mom had a good relationship in the family. That's what I remember. How
about Bennett? Do you know anything about that heritage on that side, what country they might be from, or no?
I don't. I don't. I may have known, but I don't think so.
Okay. Any other things about your grandparents? Their professions or anything else about them?
Well, it seems to me like my grandfather Bennett was a doctor. in his day. And I remember for some reason, and this is kind of crazy, that my grandmother never had to work when he died. From the time, I mean, she had young daughters and stuff, and
Her daughters were still young.
her daughters were young, and but she also, lived with my aunt. My mom's junior sister had a shop in Fairway, and she was married at one time and then was divorced, but she lived with them for a long time.
Okay, well, how about if we move on to your parents, your mom and dad? Your mother, can you tell me her name?
Olive Bennett Soul.
Where was she born?
I mean, they always lived in Kansas City, Kansas.
So they just were all from there.
So I think, she was born in Kansas City, Missouri, or wherever.
But Kansas City area.
Kansas City area.
Okay. Well, now, how would you describe your mother when you think about her?
She was very motherly. She sewed and cooked. It was busy back in those days when, everything was a lot harder to do. She was a good mom.
Took good care of you and your family, huh?
Yeah, she did. She worked for a while when I was in college, and I honestly don't know what she did, but she worked for a while.
Outside of the home.
Outside the home, but most of her time was not working.
Although she was probably working very hard, right?
Well, yeah.
So what was your relationship like with your mother? Were you close?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. She was very into church. She was active in the church, and my dad was active, and we went, every Sunday, and that was a real part of her life. She was involved in that a lot. She was somewhat involved in PTA and stuff for us, for my brother and I.
Was she a good cook? Do you remember things?
Yes.
Any special dishes you remember that she made?
No. Yeah, she was a good cook. I still like eggplant. That was something she made that takes time. Yeah. Do you realize? And I helped her. But
did she teach you how to cook?
Kind of. She tried, but I wasn't really that interested at the time.
Did she have any other hobbies or interests that she liked to do?
Like I think I mentioned, she did sew, and she made a lot of my clothes.
Did you ever learn to sew?
No, and that's one of my regrets. I didn't learn from her. She tried to get me, but you know how teenagers can be sometimes. That wasn't my thing.
Do you think that you are like her in any ways, personality-wise or looks? What do you think you inherited from your mother?
What do I think I inherited? Well, I still go to church, and I am active in my circle.
So her faith.
Yeah.
Did she live a long life? How old was she when she passed away?
She died, I think, in 1990.
So quite a long life then.
Yeah. She was in a nursing home at the time. My dad was also in a nursing home when he died.
Well, let's talk about your father then, okay? Now, what was his name?
Howard Stewart Soul.
And he also was born in Kansas City?
I assume, yeah.
What did he look like? How would you describe him?
He was very thin. I mean, he didn't have to worry about putting on weight at all. What do I remember about him? I don't remember as being a lot of help to my mother. But he worked as a machinist at the Union Pacific Railroad, and I'm sure he was help. I just don't, you don't follow a lot of that sometimes.
What was his personality like? Was he outgoing? Was he warm, or was he more distant?
He wasn't as loving as my mother, but I don't know that that's unusual,
Who was the disciplinarian in the family?
I think more Mom, yeah.
Did you feel like you had a close relationship with your father?
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, yeah. When he was older, I knew that he and I were not going to live together in the same house for a long period of time. When he was sick or something, after Mom died, of course he lived by himself. And I knew that it would be hard for me to live with him all the time. And I told him, that he was sick one time and came to stay until he recouped. And I said, let's give it 6 weeks and see how you're doing. And I said, because with the kids and everything, it's just, we didn't have the space and everything for another person. It was not going to work.
Did that 6 weeks work out okay, though?
I don't remember the period of time, but yeah, we started looking. He went to one nursing home and he was really sad. They told him he couldn't live there. So we had to find another one. I had to go in and say, I was going to be truthful. They've taken him out of this one, different, but he fit in. He did all right. It just took a little while.
That's a hard transition, I'm sure.
It is. I know it is. It's hard for me to move out to a house to here. That's not easy. So I'm sure. But then I had a whole house because they hadn't done much as far as cleaning.
Oh, you had to deal with your parents' home.
I had to deal with my parents' home.
That's a lot of work, isn't it?
It's a lot of work, and I put a lot of it in our basement, and then we moved here. Guess who got to deal with it again?
It never goes away, does it?
It doesn't.
Any special family traditions that you did growing up with your parents?
We went on vacations. With Dad working for the railroad, we got to ride, I don't know whether it was free or some cost, but we got to ride the trains, fairly reasonable or free. So we went a lot of different places.
By train?
By train.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
Was the Union Pacific a passenger train at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but we could use other railroads too, I think. But they had passenger service. And
what was it like riding the trains back then?
Well, we usually had overnight visits a lot of times on the train. And they had the berths. And my mother and I would share a berth. And that's kind of crowded when you're on the upper berth and you're trying. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, and we got to visit relatives, that went to California, had relatives there, and had relatives in Seattle, Washington, and had relatives in Ohio. And
so you went all those places on the train?
So we did. We went a lot of places on the train.
I'll bet that was fun.
It was. It was nice. It was interesting. Got to meet relatives I wouldn't have met.